I had never been to the games before. My mother forbade it, saying the court gladiatorial events were beneath us, Sibyl. "We're better than the gawking masses who come to witness these perverse displays," she'd say, "while this barren wasteland becomes infamous across the stars. We must build a better future for our people." Yet here I was, filtering through the benches, trailing my uncle, a mixture of nerves and excitement turning my coat a shimmering orange. "Cool down, little nephew. You look like you're about to combust." Uncle Torrance smiled, his coat the noble blue-gray of our family line, somewhat dulled from his years of excess, the life of a second-born to royalty. "Someday I hope to embody my family's coat of honorable distinction." I saw hints of shimmer and anticipation pulsing in his fur, a subtle sign of excitement. I took a few deep breaths of the desert's acidic but breathable air, calming my coat back to its steady burnt orange, a mark of youth, and perhaps of inexperience. Uncle weaved through the throngs of diverse interstellar patrons, guiding us to our viewing gate. He presented our admittance to the court guards, and we entered a bubble of relative quiet and shade. Inside, the room was dark and cool, with walls lined by tables topped with spice-laden dishes and potent drinks. A few other highborns mingled in hushed tones. My uncle spotted his friend, a Jashirian woman who owned the creche beasts that would soon take the arena. They embraced and fell into a conversation in which I had little interest. I wandered toward the expansive, curved viewport at the front of the room. It was polarized to protect us from the oppressive twin suns of this world. Through the tinted glass, I could see the massive oval of the Colosseum far below, its floor a deep, familiar red from the sands of this forsaken planet. Large gates flanked the arena, and workers raked the sand. Suddenly, the world exploded into light and sound, and I was momentarily blinded as the tint faded from the glass and ground-shaking horns bellowed through the amphitheater. We all jolted, then laughed, some of us finding seats or crowding around the window. My uncle and his friend came to stand beside me. "Freda's beasts will be the warm-up," Uncle whispered. "They claim it's to show how aggressive and dangerous they are, but she says it's so they gorge on slave meat, leaving them lethargic for the real gladiators." "She lets them kill them?" I asked, horrified. Freda chimed in. "The alpha will protect the creche and make sure too many are not killed. Unlike the slaves, the beasts are allowed to flee. Besides, I'm well compensated for any losses. Look! Here they come, the criminals, heretics, and beasts, here to start the show." My uncle roared as the gate opened. The massive window zoomed in on a sad lineup of contestants, around 20 of them, beaten and weary. I recognized every race except one, a strange pink creature, almost entirely hairless, with small patches on its brow, chin, chest, and, oddly, between its legs over a peculiar organ. Its vulnerability seemed humiliating, even for a murderer about to face their doom. "What's the pink one, Uncle?" I asked. "Not sure, my boy." "Freda?" "I think the Gret sold it as livestock," she replied, intrigued. "Never seen one before. It kind of looks like a Jesh, only with a little more fur." "And pink, not blue," Uncle joked. "Rude," she scoffed. But we all turned our attention as the contestants staggered toward the arena's center, outfitted only with basic fibrous coverings and crude weapons. A dozen smaller doors opened, releasing the creche beasts, about 10 of them. They lunged with swift, brutal power, their rear legs propelling them across the sand, while their muscular arms and massive claws guided them straight toward the contestant. 2 creche took down a fleeing Frink, tearing and devouring it while it screamed for help, green blood spraying across the red sand. I was horrified yet fascinated by the sight. I knew he was a criminal, but that was a terrible way to die. Within minutes, most of the contestants had been savagely consumed. With most of the creche distracted by their feasting, the few remaining survivors struggled, holding the smaller beasts at bay with makeshift spears. One found its mark, piercing a creche that howled in pain, freezing the others mid-meal. Seeing the injured pack member bleeding into the sand, the creche turned their attention to their fallen kin. With a collective, hungry growl, they descended upon their injured packmate, teeth and claws ripping into him without a moment's hesitation. It was a brutal display, their loyalty shattered in the presence of weakness. The sand grew darker with the beast's own blood as they feasted on one of their own. I shivered, both horrified and fascinated by the relentless nature of these creatures. The alpha female, a towering beast, was undeterred by the cannibalism unfolding around her. She barreled toward the survivors, breaking spears and bodies alike. The survivors were quickly devoured, all except one, the peculiar pink creature. The pink figure was struck by the alpha's charge and went flying, hitting the Colosseum wall with a bone-shattering thud. But, against all odds, it rolled over and began to stand. It crept along the wall to avoid the distracted beasts, reaching the gate it had entered through, and then began kicking it. The force of the kicks, though likely unheard over the roar of the crowd, echoed in my sensitive Sibyl ears, sending faint vibrations through the arena. The pink creature was actually damaging the massive gate. A few moments later, as a support beam splintered, the crash pack took notice and began closing in around the pink. Surrounded and with no escape, the pink creature picked up a spear that had fallen nearby, holding its ground. As the first beast lunged, it impaled itself on the spear, orange blood spilling across the sand. The crowd gasped, then erupted in cheers. "Well, I'll be damned," Uncle mumbled. "Never seen that before," Freda muttered, both impressed and perturbed. The pink being jerked the spear free just as another Kresh charged. With surprising skill, it slashed the creature's snout, causing it to retreat in pain. The alpha, enraged, barreled toward the lone survivor, each powerful step kicking up small explosions of sand. But the pink didn't move. The crowd worked itself into a frenzy, screaming as it watched. The creature didn't flee, it just stood there, its blood-slicked form in immovable force. The alpha's charge reached a fever pitch, and in the final moments, the pink slowly raised the spear, bracing the butt on the rough dirt floor of the Colosseum, razor tip leveled toward the charging animal. The alpha plunged into the spear, ripping it free of the strange man's grasp and spinning her off balance, crashing to the ground in a pile of fur, muscle, and fury. The pink staggered forward, sand crunching beneath bare feet. He picked up a discarded blade from the ground, tightening his grip until his knuckles turned white. In the silence that fell over the arena, each step toward the wounded alpha was deliberate, ominous. The crowd seemed to lean in, captivated by what was about to happen. I held my breath, transfixed, as the pink's shadow fell across the alpha's face. She lay on her side, chest heaving, her massive claws flexing in the sand. Blood matted her fur, and a low, guttural snarl rumbled from her throat. Though her strength was waning, she was still capable of ripping a man in half. "He's going to do it," my uncle breathed. The pink stood above the alpha, knife raised, her fierce eyes locked into his, ablaze with pain and defiance. He met her gaze, taking another step forward into her reach. Then, with a gentleness no one expected, he placed his hand on her snout. A murmur of astonishment swept through the Colosseum. His fingers moved slowly, tracing her fur, and the alpha's eyes widened in wary recognition, a flicker of trust replacing the raw fury in her gaze. She broke eye contact, let out a soft snarl, and snapped viciously. But he moved his hand away, as if expecting it, while his other hand struck her throat, and she fell limp, defeated. The pink did not bellow in victory, only made a soft hiss sound that echoed through the silent arena. The crowd was as silent and still as the beast. I felt my chest tighten, a strange sadness overtaking me. The pink's fingers brushed through the alpha's fur, gentle as a whisper, his voice low and soothing. Her breathing, once labored and pained, softened as she surrendered to his touch, closing her eyes as if finally free of the violence that had brought her here. I blinked, surprised to find my vision blurring with tears. When I looked at Freda beside me, tears traced her face as she whispered, "This isn't right. It's not supposed to be possible anymore." Even Uncle's hardened face betrayed a flicker of awe, his coat blooming with the glory of both war and love, as we saw two creatures forced together by bloodshed and yet sharing an unspoken bond of empathy. However, the rest of the pack sensed her weakness and smelled her blood. They began to advance, eyes gleaming with hunger as they prepared to devour their weakened leader. They charged at full speed, yipping and howling in anticipation of the blood to be spilled. The crowd's excitement shifted from a lust for carnage to a concern that grew into warning cries. For the first time, the screams were not of encouragement but pleas to stop. But before they could reach their prey, the pink creature rose, one hand placed gently upon the alpha's snout, the other outstretched to the horde. He stood with a posture so fierce it radiated command, yet his gaze held a strange, otherworldly calm. Then, in a voice that seemed to shake the very walls, he commanded, "HEL!" The word echoed, foreign and potent, each syllable carrying a strange authority that not only stunned the pack, but seemed to hold the entire Colosseum in its grip. The creche halted, skidding to a confused, uncertain stop as though spellbound by the pink being's dominance. Sentient and beast alike were frozen in the same astonishment, watching as he slumped back against the wounded alpha, eyes closing in exhaustion. The connection between them was undeniable now, a strange alliance between predator and prey, something entirely beyond survival. Guards rushed into the arena, rifles raised, their presence breaking the spell and restoring a semblance of order. Yet the image remained seared into my mind, the pink creature shielding the once deadly alpha, both of them bloodied, vulnerable, and somehow bound by a wordless understanding. Fredo was the first to recover, snapping commands into her control screen with fierce urgency. The remaining creche hesitated, but her forceful commands compelled them back through their escape hatches, vanishing into the depths of the Colosseum. "Uncle?" I whispered, my heart pounding with something I couldn't name. "Yes, boy." His voice was as shaken as I felt, still caught between awe and bewilderment. "Purchase that pink being," I said, my voice carrying an edge of finality I hadn't known I possessed. "Deliver it to me immediately." He stared at me, the faintest trace of approval in his eyes as he nodded. "It will be done,"